Hi, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. So, hello. I am trying out sort of a new format, sort of new equipment. So, I thought I would just stick my feet in there and let's do a broadcast because I got some things I want to talk about. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Brighter Michigan PAC for sponsoring us today. I'm in their studio, and the things I say don't necessarily reflect them. So if I trigger you, you're not going to get me fired because they don't pay me. Like in that kind of regard, they're not my boss, but I thank them for the studio space and the opportunity. And so, like I said, I'm getting kind of used to some things here, and I thought I would get my feet wet because some things broke out that I saw from the day before and a few days that happened on CNN. So, you know what? I just decided that I needed to go ahead and talk about these things. So, if you ever watched New Day with Breonna Keller, she's a little insufferable. So CNN tries to paint themselves as though they are not like MSNBC and other networks. Like there's other ones that are just like hardcore, like that's on the left. Like Rachel Maddow, you know what you get, right? CNN tries to paint themselves like they're a little bit above board, but we know that is not the case at all. Through whether it's like, I don't know, undercover stuff that you saw with Project Veritas or just the bias that's blatant with their newscasters, you can tell that they are activists, which is much of the media. They're a bunch of activists, and they might as well just go to work with Biden caps on their heads. I mean, a lot of them are just so blatantly biased, and it's not even close to any sort of objective media that they have. The closest person, I don't know, the person I can say is probably the most above board on that network is maybe like Jake Tapper, but he even still like gets on your nerves sometimes. So which he'll probably revel in because he says like take off both sides or whatever. But sometimes Jake, you be out of pocket too. But this woman here on New Day, she's just like, I don't know. She should be on like MSNBC or something. And I'm gonna play like two different examples of recently from the past. One is from yesterday, I believe, and the other one's from a couple days ago. She was talking to a black congressman about why why the Black Congressional Congress does why they don't want him. So the Black Congressional Caucus, I'm sorry. So, which BuzzFeed broke an article, and then they asked him to come on, and she just had a series of questions that were just way out of pocket. But before that, I want to back up a little bit. So some of you may know that my family went to Mexico as of recently for a missionary trip, them and some church members. And so they had a great time, but my sister said that there was nothing pretty much but CNN down there. People weren't watching Fox News. That she claimed that they didn't have that at all, but and they had just the stuff that they were watching that was like CNN and their version of CNN, etc. And so she was talking to lovely young woman. And so she believed that Trump hated all Mexicans. And my sister's like, no, that's not true. When Trump was talking about, certain people, he was talking about the cartels. He was talking about drug traffickers or sex traffickers. Those are kind of people, MS-13. He does not hate, Hispanics or anyone of any sort of descent like that. He just doesn't like the people who are bringing over drugs and committing crimes and he prioritizes, sending back criminals, but everyone would, like everyone to please follow the laws and respect our borders. So she had to explain that to her. And so she loved Obama because the media loves Obama, and that's what they portray, portray Obama, that you can love and appreciate and so on. And so she's like, oh, well, he's just a, good Christian man. And my sister's just like, well, he really did a lot more for like Muslims and gays than he did, kind of stand up for righteous things for Christians. And so she was just like blown away by that. And so she also thought like Black Lives Matter was this heroic group. And so after she just like kind of blew her mind with like fact after fact after fact, she's like, well, at least I know that George Floyd, I believe he was a hero. For some reason, this woman down in Mexico thought that George Floyd was a national hero. Um, my sister's like, no, honey, no. He was actually like, had drugs in his system at the time when he died, and he had these stints with crimes and other stuff like that. Not that he deserved to die. That's not what she told her or anything like that, but she just let her know that whatever CNN had been portraying to give her this sort of worldview was totally just not aligned with reality. And I'm sure you guys are aware of examples like that, that you can name and list. But when you think about all these people that you argue with online, sometimes we're from, like when you're on Twitter, you got to keep in mind that's like a global platform that you're arguing with people with. And so sometimes they get people from Europe, sometimes you're arguing with people, from Mexico or Asia, just anywhere around the world. And so you got to keep in mind that there's people in the US who are blinded with a certain ideology because of whatever they watch, whatever they read. I mean, I knew somebody who got their political information from just TikToks, and this is a grown woman. So people have whatever skewed views that they have, but there's other people in other countries who have skewed opinions from whatever is available in their countries. And so CNN is very global. So you have to keep in mind that there might be a lot of people tuning out CNN here, but there's globally, it still has, I guess, a pretty big impact there. CNN, propaganda network for Democrats, and just a propaganda network, period. But you know what? The media really should be about informing people. And so Project Veritas did some videos going undercover with CNN, and they had like technical directors admit things like, oh, we would make up stuff like the Trump's afraid of stare story, or they saw his hand shake a little bit and they're like, ooh, we're going to bring on medical experts and pretend like he has a condition or allege that, or take the story there. Like they would talk about how they would, kind of try to manipulate stories or invent stories and so on. So I don't know how Project Veritas gets all these people to admit all these things. I'm like, is everyone really, I don't drink. So is everyone like that vulnerable when they have alcohol? Like, like it doesn't seem like they have, I mean, I'm sure they have all these techniques and tactics that they talk to these people about, but I'm just like, why would you like do that to yourself if you work in the news, if you work in politics, like, and I've known there's been some loose lip people like on both sides of the aisle, but when they get some drinks and they start maybe spilling more than what they should, but that's like absurd to me that Project Veritas can get these people to spill their guts like that. But anyway, they got them to admit some interesting things. But something else that was revealed in the Cohen tapes. Now this is from while Trump was running, and so this story broke on Fox News some time ago, and I don't think a lot of people realize how big of a deal something like this was. Like we know their bias. We know like a lot of stories actually that broke, people didn't think they were a big deal because it didn't reveal like something that people didn't already know. It just pretty much confirmed it. But what I'm about to play from like Zucker having a conversation with Cohen, who still at the time worked for Trump, really says a lot about the ideology with these news networks. So here we go. I'm going to play this clip.
He started bragging about himself, as he is wont to do. After a few pro forma words about their family, Zucker launched into an extended lecture about his own importance. Here's the thing, Zucker announced to Cohen. You cannot be elected president of the United States without CNN. Fox and MSNBC are irrelevant in electing a general election candidate. If you want to run the country, in other words, Jeff Zucker said, you've got to sniff my throne. It's not that CNN needs the help, he explained. Quote, we're killing it. We're doing great. But Donald Trump badly needs CNN. Quote, you guys have had great instincts, great guts, great understanding of everything, but you're missing the boat on how it works going forward. Oh, how it works going forward. Okay, Michael Cohen replies, why don't you email Donald Trump and tell him that? And at that point, for the first time in the conversation, Jeff Zucker pauses. It turns out that Jeff Zucker doesn't like to write things down. Sneaky people never do. So here's what he says next.
I'm very conscious of not putting too much in email. As you're a lawyer, as you understand, and, and as fond as I am of the boss, he also has a tendency, if I call him or I email him, he then is capable of going out in his next rally and saying that we just talked. And I can't have that, if you know what I'm saying.
People would know I talked to Trump, and I can't have that, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so the big takeaway from there is, in people with influence, or just in general, they try to brag and try, boost who they are to just, bragging rights or whatever. But saying you can't win the White House without CNN. Aren't you guys just supposed to report the news? That clearly sounds like you're taking a side. You're admitting their sides. You're admitting you play a role in who gets elected. So we talk a lot about, we want everyone to have the freedom to do all these things, but when there's information that's being manipulated, how free of a society are we when our news media isn't actually a free and fair press? When they're deliberate extensions of the Democrat Party, how fair is our society when they're just blatantly one-sided? And you know what? I'm biased, obviously. I have my convictions that I'm here to talk about. I'm bashing an entire news network. So it's fine if people have biases, but they pretend like they don't. But at the same time, you have organizations that will, they're so powerful they can create hatred for that kid that just smiled while a man got in his face, and Nicholas Sandmann, and they turned him into a vicious villain, and all he did was smile and stood there respectfully as an elderly man got in his face and was really disrespectful. So they ended up having to settle, so there's that, I guess. But they can take a few seconds of information and just twist it into the most vile sort of thing. And we've seen them do it. We've seen them go to houses of people to investigate private citizens because they tweeted something. They do the most absurd things in the name of their story, in the name of their narrative, while not covering Biden with a lot of scrutiny, without asking hard questions, while just really being clown central. You don't see the kind of boldness that Jim Acosta had when Trump was in office. You don't see that, at least not from CNN. The only person out there really, I don't know, kind of being antagonistic, I guess, with Jen Psaki is Peter Doocy right now from Fox. And sometimes they ask the dumbest stuff, and she says so many dumb things too. It's just incredible that the news media doesn't do more with all the things that they give them. But they allowed Biden to basically sleepwalk into the presidency, and they pushed him along. They helped him along because, as Zucker said, he believes that you can't win the White House without CNN, and CNN did their part. They played their part. They have a role to play, and they played it how they wanted to. They are totally biased. So specifically, what I wanted to talk about that kind of got my blood boiling a bit was this anchor from New Day. And so that's an early show that comes on with CNN. And so she was interviewing Katie Hill. And so Katie Hill, as you may recall, she had to resign some time ago, and resign, I would say, in disgrace. And since she has been resigned in, I would say, disgrace, she's been playing the victim. Now, her ex did some very not nice things. She also did some very not nice things. But she's been playing the victim as if, I don't know, as if it was a sexist society that's come out to get her, when the truth is that she was an inappropriate aggravator, I suppose you could say. So I'm going to play a bit of this interview. It was a very friendly interview, and it's you can see where it's chopped up. It's not the whole thing, obviously, but I just want to play some little snippets of this interview.
You have been leading an effort since you left Congress to deal with the issue of revenge porn and on the Violence Against Women Act, and really these issues altogether about what women endure and should not endure.
We have a provision that we were able to get into the House version called the SHIELD Act, which makes cyber exploitation, intimate image abuse, also known as revenge porn, a federal crime. And that's the first time it would ever be a federal crime. It is a big deal. It sends an important message to anyone who's considering, sending these pictures or sharing these pictures of somebody else, that this is absolutely wrong. It's not just wrong for you as an individual, but it's wrong for us as a society, and it has to not be normalized anymore.
Here in the post-Me Too era, it's hard to imagine there just not being this appetite to push some of these measures forward. Before I let you go, will you run again?
Listen, I haven't written anything off.
So she's like, "Oh, will you run again?" And it goes on. It's a longer interview than that. You can go check it out. On Facebook, I don't know, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You can see that interview that she had, and she's like, "Oh, are you going to run again?" And she's talking about on this Me Too era. It's crazy that they won't push through this legislation of violence against women and this revenge porn act and all these other things. And you got to come in and you got to fix this. So basically, she's out there and she's just smiling. Do you see those kind of smiles when they're like interviewing like Republicans? Like if they're smiling, it's like, kind of just snake in the grass, kind of waiting to like strike you kind of smile. It's not like a sincere, like, oh, not like, she's kind of beaming with excitement, it looks like. Okay, the reason why Katie Hill, if you do not know why she resigned, is because she was, she had an inappropriate relationship with her staffer. And she had an affair and she had an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. And so that is a power discrepancy. So if you want to talk about Me Too movement, she is one of the aggravators of such a thing, but she doesn't get trash that the normal way that a man would probably be trashed in the situation is because she's bisexual. I'm going to go ahead and say that, women are like treated with a different standard usually. So the reason why, they didn't go as hard as they could. And the reason why she gets to go around and pretend that she's a victim is because she's a woman and she's a Democrat, because if she was a Republican, they wouldn't necessarily let her get away with all this stuff either. And she'd already be like thrown into obscurity or whatever. So, but here you have a CNN anchor basically trying to rehabilitate her career, saying you got so much work to do with this Me Too movement stuff type legislation. It's like, this is a person who inappropriately used her power and was with a staffer, and that was against the House rules, the ethic rules. And so basically she had to resign because she was going to be kicked out. It had nothing to do with people not liking, bisexuals or gays or whatever. It had nothing to do with being sexist and not liking women or anything like that. She had an inappropriate relationship with a staffer and had to resign. And so how it all got thrown out there was that her ex decided to leak the photos to a red state media, or more specifically the Daily Mail. And so they put the story out there, and then it became of national interest, obviously. And so she actually took them to court. And that's one thing that she said in the end of the interview. She's like, well, I do have some like court fees to work out. So she took them to court over revenge porn. And that is a thing. And obviously that's an awful thing. Look, I don't care if you're in a relationship with someone. I would definitely never, in this age of just forget it, that someone might leak it. Like, what if it's hacked? Like, why would you take any sort of pictures like that at all? That's crazy to me. Absolutely insane. Now, leaking stuff for like revenge or just in general, like obviously that's a terrible thing. So, but anyway, he gave it to the media. The media put it out there, and so she sued them, and him, and then the media outlets that pushed it. And so the court ended up siding with the news media because they said her suing that you're going against their First Amendment rights. They have access to this. They can post it. They can do a story about it. And it's of the public's interest because she is a public figure And not just because she's a public figure, but she's a public figure who's having an inappropriate relationship with her staffer. If she was like, I don't know, if it was with the housekeeper or something, then that's a little bit more just risque, sort of typical trashy, like tabloid stuff. But the fact that she had an inappropriate relationship with a staffer is why everything went down this road. And so they've been trying to rehabilitate her. They've been trying to make her seem like a victim. She has her own, like, I guess, organization where they speak up for these things and talk about these issues and so on. But you got CNN trying to rehabilitate her and asking if she's going to go back to Congress after she did the nasty with a staffer. So I thought that was really interesting that she did that. So, but people on Twitter were pointing out it's interesting that she was so friendly to Katie Hill, but she didn't take the time to be so kind to this Black representative who the Black Congressional Caucus didn't want him in because apparently they don't share the same values or the same views. So she decided to be pretty nasty, I would say, and really came off as an advocate, as an activist, rather than a journalist. So I'm going to play the beginning of the interview, and I'm just going to talk you through, and then I'm going to play like another clip.
Pleasure to be with you.
All right, so you heard that statement from the CBC, and what's implicit but pretty clear here is that in that statement, they're basically saying they don't think you share their values and priorities for the constituents they serve. And I wonder what your reaction is to that.
My reaction is pretty simple. First, I heard about this report yesterday when BuzzFeed, I think, is the one that broke the article. We've not really heard much from the CBC since they asked me when I came in as a new member in the 117th if whether I would join or not. It's important for your viewers to understand that when I served in Florida's legislature, I was a part of the Legislative Black Caucus for 4 years. I've actually been to a couple of the CBC conferences in Washington, D.C. I'm a poor kid from Brooklyn, New York. I'm 42 years old. I've been able to be successful in my life. So whether it's talking about jobs or, yes, even voting rights or anything that the CBC wants to talk about, I have a perspective being a 42-year-old Black man who's come up in America after a lot of the battles through the civil rights movement that I think will be helpful and a helpful perspective to the CBC. Whether they want to take advantage of that is really up to them. But it's something that I've actually expressed interest in joining. I think having a wider range of discussions from all sides of the political framework is important, not just for Black America, but all America.
Okay, so he lays out his case. I would like to join. I've been part of that, like in Florida. I am obviously a Black man. I know what it's like to come up through like the hood and the typical kind of situation the Democrats try to paint or whatever, single hood mom and all, and poverty rising up. And I mean, I don't know huge about his background and stuff, but as he kind of laid it out, he's taken himself, made something of himself, and has gotten to Congress. Now, obviously, the problem with this man is that he is a Republican. And so Democrats, they diss Republicans for not being more diverse. But when there is someone who does have a diverse thought, they attack them. I knew this in general, but it's crazy. Like I joined TikTok, and actually that's like the platform where I'm like doing the best actually right now is on TikTok. And so there be people who will have the sentiment of like Republicans are racist, but and if they'll be like, well, if Republicans aren't racist, then how come mostly it's like 87% of Black people are Democrats? And it's like, that would be a fair question if you guys didn't treat everyone who thought differently like you like trash. Like, so if we do start bringing more diversity to our base, the Republican base, what do you guys do? You treat them like garbage. You call them like, there's a phrase called pick me. If you don't know what that means, pick me is like you're saying these things for validation. So people accuse me of saying whatever I'm saying for white validation and they'll say like, oh, I counted all the comments and well, not literally all the comments, but they'll say like, I counted the comments and like 80% of them are white. Like there's literally a comment I've had before. And I'm just like, and I've mocked those people. I've mocked those people because, like, first of all, let's say the majority of the audience is white anyway. Wouldn't you have like a disproportional like amount of or maybe I guess maybe they would be more proportional. Wouldn't most of the comments probably be white if like most people operating TikTok or that age range or in the specific political category I'm talking about, if that's a white audience, like wouldn't most of the commenters be white? Now, some people have like different profile pictures than what they actually are, so I don't know how you can know that. And then some of these people who are probably trashing me probably aren't minorities either. They could be like white DNC staffers, you know, just trying to keep me and my, you know, people who listen to me down. So you can't even go by the demographics of what you just actually see in people's profile pictures, because a lot of these people who will bash you don't have videos themselves. And I've accused people of being like white DNC staffers. I'm like, prove you're real. And they're like, no, I don't got to do that. I'm like, I'll apologize if you're a real person, but they don't go that extra mile. So I'll keep assuming what I'm going to assume. But so if you're somewhere on like TikTok or somewhere and you only have an audience of like Black commenters or something who are Democrats, that means you're talking to a niche. You're talking to a niche if you're only getting like one particular set of ideas and it's not particularly diverse. So it's bad when I have maybe I'm talking to my niche, but you can talk to your niche. Like, so it's just really silly how they keep playing this audience game. But like, if you get someone like Tim Scott, who got up and was like, America isn't racist, Jimmy, Kimmel, he'll get up and make jokes like that. And he'll say, oh, well, they got him out of their deprivation chamber so he could say his little spiel, and then he went back on his way, and he made light that he's a one Republican in the Senate, not realizing that Democrats only have 2 Black senators, so there's not a huge discrepancy there. It's not a huge discrepancy. Like Republicans, they elected their first like Black senator like in the 1800s. Democrats didn't start electing Black senators until the 90s. So, and there hasn't been like a ton throughout history anyway, just in general, but it's like, if you want to play that game, like, and Tim Scott has even like mentioned, like, there's not a big discrepancy. He's like, and let's show their staff. Like, this is when Kamala was still in the Senate. He's like, I can show you the staff of Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, and you're not going to see like a huge like lineup of diverse people. So he's like, so he put them on blast about that a bit. So them complaining or pretending, like, first, I don't think inclusion actually matters to them all that much. Diversity doesn't matter to them that much. That's just the club that they beat people with. But does it matter that much? No. And so here's an opportunity. If you're saying that Blackness or Black issues is so important, then why wouldn't you want someone who's made them something of themselves and maybe you have different opinions, but maybe you can come together in some bipartisan way and craft good ideas and go before the body as a whole, like, and do bipartisan legislation. Like Trump passed, bipartisan legislation for his bill, to as far as like for crime and stuff, First Step Act. And they had to twist a lot of people's arms, Democrats and Republicans, to get to where they wanted to get that passed. And it was controversial on both sides, but a lot of people did want it and they got it passed. So how come you can't come together, even though you're on different sides of the aisle, to come to some sort of agreement? And so he's like, well, they're going to have to explain why they don't want me there. But CNN had their own opinions on why that they didn't believe they wanted him. And so Brennan went on to mention, well, you didn't accept the results of the election or you questioned them. And there's a lot of legislation going on right now with bills being passed or trying to stop bills that are being enacted to stop Black people from voting. And so like the Georgia laws, the Texas laws in Florida, like, to me, it's so silly to me because I'm from Michigan and we have our own tyrannical government here, but it's like with Gretchen Whitmer, but I'm just like, we vote like I mean, there's absentee ballots you can do, and now we have like any reason absentee, but it was pretty easy to vote absentee before they passed that. So my thing is like, why can't you just vote in one day? Like, you're complaining because you can't figure it out in 2 weeks. And since everyone can like mail stuff in, basically, like, why does it matter how long the lines are? If you want to wait in a line, that's like your choice. Like, and you have 14 days to figure it out. Okay. Just seems like really weird. Like a lot of complaining over nothing. I'm in the camp that I think you really should just have one day. I believe in that, like absentee voting and stuff, but I think we just have one day. And really, the longer the election you have, the more it disenfranchises people who are kind of on the lower income scale, I guess, as far as fundraising. Because if the election days are longer, you have different manpower, different sort of ads, and if you start having to move up the days, then you have to have things ready faster, ads different days, and so on, people stationed in different areas. If you have a bigger operation, you're going to be at a much better advantage, and maybe that won't affect the presidential so much because they're raising like billions of dollars now, or like $1 billion now. I mean, Biden was the first person to like crack that number. So if they're raising that kind of money, then yeah, a presidential candidate who's raising that kind of money can last like 14 days, 21 days, however like early the voting is. But if you're running for, I don't know, a state house seat, that might be harder to do. Like, especially, let's say you're trying to take out a corrupted like incumbent. That's a little harder, I think, for you to manage like an election like for 14 days. So I think my opinion is that a lot of people, because you can think whatever you want about whatever kind of civil rights thing to make things easier. There's always someone behind the scenes trying to pass something for some reason that has something to do with money and obtaining more power. It's not everything, like very little of the things that get passed are really for your benefit. A lot of like people lobby because it benefits them, not necessarily for the people. So I would assume that people want to do early voting and people push it, even like Democrats are very hard, but Republicans also will go along with it and allow it because obviously there's a lot of rich players on both sides, and like Democrats believe that they can get people out as early as possible before like different things can break. Then they can, because they can control the masses with like CNN and stuff. So since they're controlling information, they want people to make an earliest decision as possible, which we saw last year. That like even before like, I don't know, the first presidential debate probably dropped, I think people could vote, and they're like, get your ballot, vote today. Get your ballot, vote today. We're still like campaigning, like you don't want to wait like until like some more information might drop with their views and stuff. They're like, no, go get your ballot today and go vote, because they think they've already like got your mind right now and they don't want you to change your decision. So they don't mind it on that front. But there's also the economical standpoint too. And I think, like I said, I think some Republicans will go along with like the early voting and stuff because they know it can price out people who they don't want to be competitive. That grassrootsy kind of person putting on like a grassroots operation who might not be able to stand like a 14-day like to the finish. So I think that's an interesting thing we can maybe go into more later, because also there are Republicans who push for national popular vote, and that is also an economic thing, an economic greed thing. But I'm gonna have to cover that like on a different day. But back to the point of all these people complaining. It's like, guys, you got 14 days, 17 days, a week or whatever. I've always been like go on the voting day, so I don't have a lot of sympathy there, I guess. But there was so much exaggeration on the laws. And it's not discriminatory, and then they try to make it seem that way. Black people and the IDs and just really infantilizing people, insulting them, and just so on. So she said, well, they have these laws and we're pushing a lot of things, and now they're trying to do the For the People Act to correct some of these legislation, and you're against that. So maybe they feel like you're like going to be pushing against that. So he tried to say people can vote more now, not less. And so she quoted some things that were favorable to her opinion. And she said, no, that what you're saying isn't true. So then she went on to associate him with Trump. And she said, well, maybe they don't want you because you supported Trump. And that could be true. And but she even had a montage prepared of things from Trump. Now, do you always have montages prepared to queue up like on the random, or is that just like the planned line of attack of the conversation? It was probably the planned attack against this man. And so before I play her thought structure, I just want to say it's really degrading how these people try to whittle you down. They try to whittle down these Black people down to one white man. Isn't that gross? Don't you think? That like, for example, Chief Craig, he's there's all this buzz about him running for governor in Michigan. And so when he retired, there was Democrats getting on the news talking about, oh, well, we're going to associate him with Trump. He can't remove himself from the stain. They said that as if he was on the campaign shining the man's shoes or something like that. It's not even that deep. Maybe he probably voted for him because he would have been a better president than Biden and Hillary, or he was a better president like Biden, and them just coming and just screwed all kinds of stuff up. But they want to associate whatever hatred they have of Trump and belittle their thoughts, their opinions, their individuality, their ideas, whoever they can be. And they want to strip all that away. They think Blackness is so important. They uphold it like it's so important. And yet they strip it all bare and say that's not more important than this white man we worship. And not like, I'm not saying the Black Republicans worship him. I'm saying the Democrats, people hate him to a point where they've uplifted him to a status that a president shouldn't have. People would ruin relationships over Trump. And he was their sun, their stars, their moon. CNN is still talking about them. I talked about my family went to Mexico. They were still talking about January 6th and the election and stuff, while there was so much other news going on, like with the Wuhan lab and all this other kind of stuff. But they're still talking about January 6th. And the president he may come back, but he's not there no more. You got a really crappy president that you can focus on and talk about, but they want to do glowing stuff. And he's boring because he's practically asleep. And they don't want to talk about Kamala because she's just like insufferable. And their ratings are down. They remember the good times. The good times were Trump. So that's who they got to keep focusing on. But the whole world revolves around them. And when they see me, or they see Tim Scott, or they see this gentleman, they don't care about they're black. They don't care about their thoughts. They have to totally demean those things. And they have to reduce them down into a white man. Yet they think Republicans are white supremacists. Okay, I'm going to play her clip.
Furthermore, you have defended President Trump you've said he's done enough when it comes to rebuffing ideas about white supremacy. But I do want to listen to some of his prominent comments on the subject of race to get your perspective.
Blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. Who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and Proud Boys.
Stand back and stand by. When people proudly had their Confederate flags, they're not talking about racism. They love their flag. It represents the South. What do you prefer? Blacks for Trump or African Americans for Trump? George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I am sorry that started like breaking up a little bit. So some of the clips that they had are just really silly to me. Like some of those clips are from like his Charlottesville response and like the George Washington clip. So the context of that conversation is there were people who, now I would have never been there. So I don't know about the people who did go there, but there were people who do like to preserve history or in general, whatever. And then of course there were the evil people who were there. So the big story was that he said the both people on both sides comment. And so they were saying that Trump was defending neo-Nazis, but they left out the next part where Trump said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis. I condemn them completely. And so they like, this was the lie that was like big enough to like just ding him for like the next few years, right? It's like, this is a lie that Biden ran on. He said he was going to restore the soul of our nation. And he like had a whole huge Charlottesville montage when he did his campaign. Like, this was the lie he launched off of. I know he knows what he's saying isn't true. Like someone from Breitbart confronted him and was like, hey, you know, he was like, Trump literally condemned them, right? And so people like Scott Adams, the cartoonist who wrote Dilbert, he kind of led the effort on debunking this and pushing back against the Fine People hoax. That's what people call it. So I think it's interesting that she, obviously they left out that kind of part too. But without needing to say the Fine People part, you know, because that's been debunked so thoroughly, but she still was deceptive in what she did. So another part that was from that day was that Donald Trump mentioned like, well, kind of like, where do we end this? Where will it stop with people tearing down statues of inconvenient history? Like, if we tear down this, we tear down this, we tear down this. It's like, what about George Washington? He was a slave owner. Are we going to tear down George Washington? And people acted like that was so crazy and so bogus. But what happened last year? Like, people were going around tearing down all kinds of statues, defacing all kinds of statues of everyone, everything, trying to remove basically everything that they could. Now, side note, I think it's so interesting that people judge like the past so harshly when they're out here like advocating for the murder of babies. So it's just kind of like, check your own heart first, guys. But they were out there literally tearing down statues, destroying statues. And so he was right. He was right about this. Like, how far are we going to let these people take this? Because it's not going to end with Robert E. Lee, who is, you know, is a more kind of historical, fascinating figure than he fought for the South. I mean, both the Union and the Confederate Army both wanted him. And he chose Virginia because back then you had kind of more allegiance to your state. And you got to realize people had like family on both sides that they're just basically fighting. But I mean, you know, he would have been fighting against, if he was in the Union, he'd have been fighting against his own family and stuff like that. So it's a lot more complex than the black and white things we like to paint history. People try to justify critical race theory, which is like just racist Marxist propaganda. And they try to say that Republicans don't want to talk about it because they want to whitewash history. And it's like, well, you guys are kind of whitewashing history by choosing it to look through that, your kind of certain prism without any sort of context. So Trump was right when they said, you know, if they're going after this, where will it end? They're going to start tearing down other stuff. My personal opinion is that if people want to tear down their, not tear down, but remove their statues, that is totally a local issue, and they can vote on that. Like that's how I felt. Like the whole Charlotte's, like watching that on TV. Like, actually, I got in kind of late because I had a very productive day that day. I had a book signing thing, like an author signing. Then I went to go like watch a Ninja Warrior tournament, like across the state. I had a great day. And then I came home, I'm like, what the heck happened to the world? I'm just like, and I'm just kind of amazed at the idiocy of the world that this kind of chaos could happen over some statues. I was just like floored at just in awe of the insanity. And so having conversations with people later, there's some people who are like, it's history, you need to leave that kind of stuff up. So, you know, just to have conversations or knowledge, like you can't just blot out things that you don't like. And then but my opinion was just like, if that's what they want to do and that's what they vote to do, that's what they choose to do. And that's a local thing. And we can have all have our opinion on the outside looking in about how people run that stuff, but it's a local thing, I think. So Anyway, that's the context of that. So she played the thing about the Washington. He was a slave owner. I don't. Well, so what was the point of her doing that? Was she trying to claim that Trump was bragging about it? Was uplifting him for being a slave owner? Because I don't know what someone who doesn't have the context of that would think, but I do know the context behind that. So I question her agenda there. People do bring up the Confederate flags. I personally don't get it because they lost. So I don't understand the Southern pride thing associated with that personally. But it is part of their culture, I guess. But like I said, I don't get it. Like, you lost. But Republicans started tearing, like, the South is being Republican. That is a very like new phenomenon. Like, consistently, that is a new phenomenon. Like, the South, predominantly Democrats until like recent history. And even like Republicans and Democrats and even Black people, whatever, who live down there, that's stuff that they've seen, been part of their heritage. So I guess, you know, when people try to bring that up to me all the time, they're like, well, Republicans are using this flag. I'm just like, I could not care less about this topic. Like, go talk to someone who can justify it. I'm not that person. Like I said, like, I don't get it. But like, to try to use all these clips to justify this Black man not getting into the Black caucus when all these comments and stuff are from a whole different individual is just silly. Is just silly. Now, what's really silly is that if this was Kamala Harris talking to her and they were talking about racial justice or something like that, do you think CNN would just have a video clip ready to go of all the racist stuff Biden said? Do you think CNN would have that together? I don't think so. But since I just brought it up, you can go to blacktnews.com and get this shirt with Biden and not denounce white supremacy, defeat Joe Biden. It's got a list of his racist history on the back. If you want to pick that up at blacktnews.com, you can totally do that. But like you ain't Black, he lied about participating in civil rights. There's a comment he said about the 7-Eleven with the, Indians. He said Black people don't have diverse thoughts. And he said, he was talking to Hispanics. And he said, unlike the African-American community, you guys have diverse, opinions about different things. And so it's like, I think Black people don't have diverse thoughts. And you guys know that too. So it's like, do you think like going to other groups and just being racist toward another group is how you get in with that group? Is that what white leaders think that they're supposed to do? Because that's really strange, bruh. That is really darn strange. That is really, really strange, sir. So they wouldn't treat a Democrat like that, saying like, you support Biden and he has this history. Let me play this montage of all the awful things that they said to maybe explain why you can't get into the Black Congressional Caucus. And all those people in the Black Congressional Caucus, they who are Democrats, they obviously voted for Joe Biden. So how come they won't bring them on CNN and then play a montage of Joe Biden's racism and ask them to justify that? And because people have their own individuality. Like, I would like to question them on why they voted Joe Biden. Like, I've heard some people say that they're both racist. I don't think that's the case. I think, but I definitely think that Joe Biden, if you had to compare, I think Joe Biden like outweighs Trump for sure in that measure. But people decide who they vote for all kinds of particular reasons. I couldn't believe all the diverse reasons that people decided to vote for Trump. People I could not believe voted for Trump, voted for him in 2016 for all sort of reasons, some weird and strange and good and bad. But people have their reasons. And if you just want to belittle someone down to Trump bad, so you don't deserve to be on the Black Congressional Caucus. And so Byron kept saying, this congressman, he kept saying, it's up to the Black Caucus to tell me, to make a statement to say why they won't let me in. And he's like, Trump is irrelevant in this conversation. Like, why are you even bringing him up? And then she's just like, well, I do think he's relevant because you support him. And he said all these things. He did all these things. And by the way, would you like Blacks for Trump or African Americans for Trump? Like, why did she include that? Why did she include that? Or there's my African American over there. I remember people trying to make it a big deal, but why was that a big deal? Why did CNN think that's a big deal? Why are they portraying it like it's a big deal? My issue was that it's like egregiously uncool. Like, there's my African American, and so that was really my big issue with it. But was it racial? No, You Ain't Black is racial and super offensive. But Joe Biden said that, not Trump. That was offensive. Black people don't have diverse thoughts. That's offensive. Lying to Black voters in a church about participating in the civil rights movement, that's super offensive. Poor kids are just as smart as white kids. That could be a little slip of the tongue, but that's like offensive. But when you pair that with minorities can't get on the internet, and also pair it with like young Black entrepreneurs can't get lawyers and accountants, like there's a pattern developing there. That's a pretty clear pattern of what you think about us little Negroes, Biden. So Biden has his issues, but here's their guy. He's their guy that they support. So to me, it's really disgusting that CNN would bring on him to talk about this thing that's going on with the Black Caucus, and he had the right approach. Like, this is what I stand for. This is who I am. I could be a benefit. I would like to be there. Like to be part of the conversation, because obviously he would butt heads with people, but that's okay. We have a process, and sometimes you have to work with people across the aisle, and you have to have conversations, and you have to, work together to try to bring things up that would benefit your community. So he would be a good person, especially why wouldn't you want Republicans in there who can maybe talk to other Republicans when they're trying to pass something? Because if you just remain divided, they're going to get their guys and they're going to have their guys, and you're just going to be going at each other. Why wouldn't you want someone who you can maybe bridge the gap on a particular issue that you care about, so they can go out and try to make that case to their colleagues? Because you do need a certain amount of votes to get things to pass, and Democrats are probably going to lose the Senate and the House. It's probably just what's going to happen in 2018, and they might get a shellacking. So it makes sense to have him be a part of their caucus. And it's good to have they say they want diversity, but they don't want diversity of thought. They say they like inclusion, but that's not true. They don't respect, like they uphold Blackness or being a woman or being gay or all these kind of things. But as soon as someone comes out and says, I'm a Republican, or I like Trump, or something like that, those virtues that they uplifted, like as if Black is being a virtue or something, those things that they uplifted, they don't matter anymore. You're just the opposition. And they belittle everything you are to a Trump vote. They belittle everything you are to a white man. That's what these Democrats do. And that's what CNN did. And it's really disgusting. It's really, really disgusting that they would do that. Crap News Network for CNN. People do still watch them, but it's not as much as usual or before or election. People's taking a dive with the ratings with Trump not being there to be, that person. So CNN is trash, as this is called. I was super offended, that she could treat this man this way. And like I said, they just take a Black person or a gay person or a woman or whatever they are, all these identifiers that they act are so grand and important, but none of that matters if at the end of the day that you decided to vote for Trump, and they have to uplift that white man over these traits that they deemed was important. So they're just really, really silly. This particular New Day on CNN, these people are activists. They're not journalists, and they're going to push whatever they want to push to get their views across. When Trump became president, the Washington Post was like, democracy dies in darkness. But but we know that it's been dark on them for a long time. As a matter of fact, when Joe Biden became the president, they were just like, oh, it's nap time. They turned off the lights, got their blankets, and we're just like, I mean, the fact checkers are like, well, now we don't have to fact check so rigorously. I'm like, are you kidding? Joe Biden is like the most prolific liar, like, that's in office. Like a lot of people lie about things, but Joe Biden will lie about obviously verifiable things. Like when he said the "you ain't black" comment, he was like, just look at my record, man. I've been endorsed by the NAACP every time I've run. Really, Joe? Every time you've run? How is that possible? Because they don't endorse people. I mean, because they're not supposed to. So that's a lie, a very verifiable lie that you just told when you tried to flex your career of helping black people, of your street cred, Joe, and you had to lie like right off the bat. Okay. How he lied about his school records. He lied about marching for the Civil Rights Act, civil rights movement, and all that other kind of stuff. And then he got caught, and he's like, "Well, I wasn't out there marching." He's like, "But I worked at he worked at a pool, right? Where the kids would rub his legs when they turned like blonde in the sun, you know, and they just loved rubbing on his legs, whatever the heck that creepy means." But said he was involved in what they were thinking. So since he was involved in what they were thinking, he felt like he could lie about that, about something kind of so sacred, I guess. So we're living in clown world right now. CNN is a propaganda network. Like I started this broadcast talking about how Zucker had said that you can't win the White House without CNN. And why is it that CNN believes that they have to play a role in that? Obviously, they're not supposed to. They're just supposed to report the news. And we know all news networks to a degree will report things to kind of build some kind of narrative, but but it's best to be straight shooters. But now we're seeing people people just shed their objectivity, like proudly, like Trump was too dangerous, so you had to come out and act differently. Like Jim Acosta of CNN, basically, they all admitted to themselves and made excuses like Trump is so bad, we have to band together and cover things differently, do things differently. Like you see people now talking about the Wuhan lab, and Jon Stewart went on Colbert's show and just totally kind of thrashed him about because Colbert was like, well, do we have any evidence from the lab? He's like, dude, a COVID virus, respiratory virus got unleashed in Wuhan, and the lab is like respiratory COVID, lab, of course, just made so much sense. Like if you had just thought about it a little bit, but they ended up starting to admit stuff, that it was possible that it was from a lab leak, which I think they probably knew it was in the Fauci emails. So they probably started just saying, oh, it's possible it could have come from the lab. I think that's probably why they started admitting that. So, but they're like, well, we dismissed it because Trump had no credibility, which I'm going to do a whole episode about this. Why do you think Trump didn't have any credibilities? I mean, he does to a lot of people, but in your eyes, why do you think that he has no credibility? Because you've been lying about him the whole time. Like when you tell the American people that the president said to go drink bleach. Yeah, that's a way to blow credibility, sure, but it also wasn't true. So, or when you make up a story and send is the man who's in charge of our armies and stuff, is he afraid of stairs? I think that's a way to kind of blow credibility, but of course that was a lie, So when you say that Trump has blown credibility, what did you do to blow it? Is the good question there. So before you watch New Day again, just be aware of the silliness. I had someone, before I close, I do want to say, someone on TikTok, was going at me a little bit, and they're like, and by the way, don't say go watch OWN or CNN because, CNN, or don't tell me to go watch Fox or OWN because I already watched those things, which I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm like, I wouldn't personally tell people to go ahead and do, I don't sit up and watch, I don't know, like Liz Wheeler, like she had a good rant or something, I maybe watched a clip of that. Or if Tucker has a good rant or whatever, I mean, I played a Tucker clip today. I'll do that. I used to like watch him religiously when he like first started, but I don't do that anymore. And I like shows like The Five, but I don't really watch Fox like that. I just watch clips here and there, and I just get most of my news from actual like reading articles and seeing what clips whatever will come out as stuff is reported on. But when I used to work for the Michigan Republican Party, we never watched Fox News. We had it on CNN all day long because we understood that these people were opposition and we needed to know what they were saying, what they were thinking, and what they were reporting on and how they're reporting on things. And I could have never done my job without watching CNN because they would say something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to have a clip of that. And we would email someone. I'm like, I need you to guys cut me a clip of this, and I'd have it and I could do my job. And my job was to make hit pieces. Well, that's not exclusively what my job was. It was to make graphics and videos and so on. But that's just the thing I like the most about my job. And if you're like, oh my gosh, she's partisan. Yes, I already admitted that I am biased. I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative. And I love to trash bad politicians that I think are going to ruin our country. So that's why I'm here. That is why I'm here, to report on such things and to expose CNN and all of their silliness. So, let me see. Watching all this play out from the UK, why do a lot of Black Americans accept being taken for fools by the Dems? That's such a complicated question. So I do have an episode that I talked about why Black people vote Democrat. It's about an hour. I think it's an hour long. If it's not an hour, it's an hour and a half. But I think it's just about an hour long. And I say about because sometimes I'll be on her for like 2 hours. And I go through 3 points of why I believe that Black people vote for Democrats. And so let me try if I can remember from the top of my head. One is like a perceived heritage because, their grandparents are Democrats, their moms or whatever. So they believe that that's just what the family is supposed to do. I say it's perceived because obviously the first like Black people who could vote and got involved were Republicans because Republicans were abolitionists and so on. So when people think about their history, their history, their roots is actually rooted in the Republican Party. No, there was no party switch. That is a dumb myth. The second thing is that Black people, more than any other race, are really, really, really into believing that their race is a part of their identity, like their Blackness is a part of who they are. And so Democrats for a long time, whether it's because they have control of the media, Hollywood, or whatever, have done a good job pairing Blackness with being Democrat. Like Joe Biden knew essentially he'd get away with that "you ain't Black" comment. Like that people say dumb stuff like that because they can get away with it. And they have gotten away with it. And he did get away with it. It was offensive to me and my family and people I knew. It was offensive to a lot of people, but they still went and they voted for him. So, but they know, or that's what they believe. And even like after like they saw more Black people who had voted for Trump, or they're Hispanics who voted for Trump, that people start trying to disown them. Like I keep talking like how the CNN anchor tried to belittle that Black Republican and whittle him down to being nothing more than a Trump voter. And the things that they espouse that they seem to care about or claim they care about diversity and Blackness and all this other stuff. They don't really care about that when you're Republican. So if you don't have the particular identity that they think that you should have, then you're just no longer a person at all. So there's that. And the last thing is that Democrats claim whatever policies that they want to get votes. and they'll lie about it. I mean, like Obama went around the country talking about Obamacare, and he said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, and all this other kind of stuff. That just wasn't true. It just wasn't true. And they knew that it was a lie. And like the architect said, if we were honest, we could have never got this passed. So, and there's a wide range of things. Like Biden didn't go around saying like, yeah, I'm going to sign an executive order that men will have to compete with girls, and then you have to allow them in the locker rooms, and I mean, I'm going to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. Well, he did talk about that a bit, but at the same time, even when he got elected, Jen Psaki's like, don't worry about it, he's Catholic, and it's like, no, we should worry. So they're not super honest about what they plan to do, because a lot of these things wouldn't jive with like the Black community, because though they might vote Democrat, a lot of them are still steeped in religious things and other stuff like that, and they're quite conservative and hold more traditional values, but they're trying to break that with a lot of like the sexualized indoctrination and stuff. But I think and the critical race theory, Marxism, propaganda. But in a nutshell, those are the reasons. I go into more depth in that video, so I would recommend going to watch that. Like the psyche of why the Black people allow it to happen. I don't know. I don't understand it. I guess because they just feel, because the other option is just so bad too, that they can forgive that. It's like the devil, you know, like they feel more safe with that than going to the other side. Because I mean, there was my sister used to work in the Detroit office in the RNC, but like the Detroit office in Michigan for the Republicans. And so there's someone who was curious about being a Republican because they didn't feel that they were a Democrat, but they were like literally scared. They were like, I don't know, Klan meetings or whatever. So they were kind of really apprehensive. They saw there were Black people in there. They went to the office and started talking to them, and they started to meet more Republicans. They're like, oh, I'm glad that all these things I believed were lies. but I think it's just Republicans miss a lot of opportunities because they don't reach out like they should, and Republicans don't reach out because they don't think there'll be a benefit, because they think that they'll just keep voting a particular sort of way. So Trump was like, what do you have to lose? He made the pitch. Some people tried to act like that was a big deal. Like Juan Williams from like Fox wrote a book about it. It was just had like all twisted in his head about what Trump meant or whatever. He just said like, take a chance on me. Like what, like it couldn't get more plain. Like you guys, your urban cities are bad. Education is bad in a lot of spots. Like there's things that you want that Republicans want. So why can't you just give me a chance? And so he made the pitch, and he got an increase. But I think the only metric that Trump did lose on, because I think he had more women and Blacks and Latinos, but white men, I think he lost the white men vote a little bit. So I guess all that like nagging your husbands probably worked a little bit at the end of the day. So I think Republicans just try a little bit harder, then I think you'd see a change, but it will still take time. It will still take time. And I see that even with what I do. There's people so programmed to just defend Democrats for any absurd reason. And if I talk about my issues, even though I can say, I've held these issues for a long time, even longer than I've, really been exposed to a lot of white people. I'm deeply conservative. My faith informs my values, and my values, there's a correlation with my politics, obviously, with my values. And people are like, no, you're just saying that to appease white people, which is just silly to me, because I'm like, why put myself out there to be berated all the time, every day by people? So it's just not like, there are people who are like, you go girl, you're so brave. But there are plenty of people who are like, you're just an Uncle Tom coon, and just say the most disgusting things. But I don't care. Their hatred gives me more power and motivation to keep doing what I'm doing. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I hope I answered that question. Thank you guys for tuning in to this segment of CNN Sucks. Actually, it was Black Tea News, but please go to blacktnews.com. I got my website there. If anyone would like to support, I'm going to ask that you would be willing to do that. You can do that via Cash App, or you can do that at blacktnews.com/donate, or you can do that PayPal link down there that's, scrolling across the ticker tape screen. Thank you for bearing with me today as I try to work through this new equipment. I'm really excited. Thank you for Brighton Michigan Pack for letting me use their studio. And please go to blacktnews.com and check out different merchandise that I have there. Like, this is one of my favorites. I am not the victim you're looking for. So often people try to make us seem out like, we have to be whatever they deem us to be, just belittle us down to some kind of character trait and then say we're oppressed or whatever. I don't accept that. I will never accept that. I am what I am. And you can't make me oppressed. I'm too busy to be oppressed is my saying. I'm just far too busy to just let you oppress me. I got like stuff to accomplish. So you can check out that shirt. I already showed you the Defeat Joe Biden, Denounce White Supremacy with a list of his racist deeds on the back. I got this really cool goat shirt, and you can get that, or this I voted for President Trump and all I got was all these different things, historic peace deals, gas prices under $2, no new wars, which that's a big one. You guys think Biden's gonna do a new one pretty soon? I would probably guess so. And this lousy t-shirt. So anyway, please go to blacktnews.com, check out that stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.